Do you ever get online and feel like there's just nothing there but bad news? You just go post after post after post. I think sometimes Adam and Eve must have felt the same way. In today's passage, Genesis chapter 4, verses 18 through 26, we're going to see if that was really the case. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad fathered Mehujael, and Mehujael fathered Methushael, and Methushael fathered Lamech. And Lamech took 2 wives. The name of the one was Adah, and the name of the other Zillah. Adah bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who play the lyre and pipe. Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. The sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I've killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is 7-fold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son, and called his name Seth. For she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. To Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. You have to feel for Adam and Eve. They had lived in paradise, and then because of their own choices, it all went south. They chose to disobey God. They chose to try to make their own way in the world, doing the thing they thought was best, and they saw that it did not produce a great result. Then, after they got pushed out of the Garden of Eden, God had told them there would come one someday. There would come a seed of theirs that would bring redemption. And then Cain was born. Eve very well might have thought that he was the answer to that prophecy. But then it all went wrong. Cain and Abel grew up. They offered their sacrifices to God. Cain's sacrifice was rejected because he didn't take the time to see what God was wanting, what he was interested in. And judgment was proclaimed upon him, and instead of trying to make it better, he rejected God. And then he was sent away, and he rejected his own calling. He was to be a tiller of the ground, but then he went away and he built a city. And then he passed those attitudes on to his own children. And they got farther and farther away from God. It seemed like one generation after another just got worse and worse until it got to this son, or great-great-great-great-grandson, Lamech, who was a bigamist. He rejected God's original plan there. And then he bragged that he was not going to take anything from anybody. Someone had offended him, someone had hurt him, and so he said he would be avenged on them. God had proclaimed a limit to the amount of vengeance that someone could take against Cain, but Lamech said, no, there'll be no limits because I will decide what's right. And so he just went overboard and was bragging about how terrible he would be. And so from Adam and Eve's perspective, things are just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. It's like they're looking at the updates in the evening and they're doom scrolling. It just keeps getting more and more depressing. But out of all of that bad news, you come to the last couple of verses in chapter 4, and they have another son, Seth, and he has a son, Enosh. And we get the good news that at that point people began to call on the name of the Lord. You know, if we're looking for bad news, there'll be no shortage of it to find. We can always find that sort of news. If we spend very much time looking through social media, likely we're going to come away a little disappointed or a little down or a little depressed. But God is at work. God's work might not always make headlines, but God is always at work. God is at work in redeeming mankind and sending a plan. He started that plan with Seth, and the plan reached its fulfillment in Jesus. And because of what Jesus did on the cross, we don't have to be consumed with the bad news, but we can know that God's plan is victorious and that God has a better way for us. We don't have to just be depressed and saddened, and we don't need to feel like the enemy is victorious, because he is not. He's a defeated enemy, and God will ultimately prevail. Well, I hope that you've had a great week, and I will see you again next week. Stay in the Word. God bless.